Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 10 of my Takashi Miike filmography review. This is my setup that I usually use for my DVD collection videos, and since I'm going to record a DVD collection addendum after this video, may as well just use the same setup instead of moving the camera around, so I'm sure Miike would appreciate the Christmas atmosphere. Now this video will bring us right up to the present day for Miike's filmography. Now I'm going to review most of the films that he's released from 2012 and 2017 that I haven't covered already in the last part of this video, but I have not seen all of them yet. Alright, so for example, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Mole Song Part 2, also known as Hong Kong Capriccio, will not be reviewed in this video because I haven't seen them yet. Now, when I do end up watching those movies, I'll post some videos on my channel and then add them to this playlist. So, any movies that I see from Miike going forward will be reviewed on this channel and then added to this playlist, to keep it comprehensive. And remember, all of the movies that I discuss will be listed in the description box below. So the first film tonight is pretty awesome. It's pretty excellent, and that is Lesson of the Evil, a 2012 horror drama hybrid. An English teacher named Seiji Hasumi is loved by his students and respected by his peers. He graduates from Harvard University with an MBA and works at a European investment bank for 2 years. Hasumi returns to Japan to pursue high school teaching. However, his outward charm masks his true nature. He concocts an extreme plan to deal with the rise of bullying and bad behavior among the student body. A few students grow suspicious of his actions, but can they uncover and expose him before things go from bad to worse? Now, right off the bat, this film offers something interesting by having the villain as the main character. And the script does a good job of slowly revealing this guy's personality, which is oddly charismatic. He actually does look after the well-being of some of his students, at least for a period of time, which will create a conflicting reaction from the viewer. You know early on that there's something unhinged about this guy, but maybe he really is attempting to help his kids out, you know what I mean? Albeit through some fairly extreme methods. Now, there's a lot of interesting content in Lesson of the Evil, which includes story and character development. The viewer really needs to pay close attention to the details in order to understand everything that is going on, because certain events happen off-screen, not on camera, and are referenced afterward. So this creates kind of a thought-provoking experience to kind of help me to stay engaged throughout the runtime, because the first half of this is pretty slow-paced. Now, the structure of the film also makes it difficult to predict which students will be in danger and when they will be in danger, so I like that. Hideaki Ito gives a fantastic performance in the lead role. I was actually never a big fan of this guy until I saw him in this movie. I previously saw his performances in films like Pyrokinesis and The Princess Blade, 2 films that I enjoyed, but he was good in those movies, but he was nothing special in them. But that all changed when I saw him in Lesson of the Evil, because he's just awesome in this. A great, nuanced, charismatic, and creepy performance. The supporting cast has some notable stars that I really feel like I have to mention. You have Takayuki Yamada from the Crow's Zero films and 13 Assassins, Shota Somatani from Woodjob and the Parasite films, and Fumi Nikaido from Why Don't You Play in Hell. So you have a really interesting supporting cast in this. I don't know if Somatani and Nikaido really hit their popularity yet. They were either on the brink or just achieved it when they starred in this movie. So it's pretty cool to see them, in, I don't know if necessarily it's their earliest roles, but one of their earlier roles, Now, there may be some controversy regarding the lengthy finale of Lesson of the Evil that uses a certain kind of violence against high school students. This is not something that we see depicted in movies very often, and there's a reason for that. It upsets people because of related events that occur in real life. Most directors would not go there, but Miike did. Good man. So most ironically, there's also some black humor, some dry black humor that's present, which could offend some viewers. This is probably Miike's most offensive film from the last 10 years, and it's all the better for it. It makes it an interesting watch. It does get pretty violent during the second half, so be wary. Now, as an added bonus, we get another classic Miike ending, which is just hilarious. It's like, like I said, blackly comical, but I liked it. I liked where he went with it. Now, in terms of flaws, there's not a whole lot here that I don't like. I would say that during the finale, there were some dumb decisions made by some of the kids down the stretch. In a situation like this, it's pretty hectic and dangerous, so you're probably not in the most logical mindset, but it felt like some of the characters just gave up, you know what I mean? Which I think was a little bit of a stretch. I'm sure it happens like that in real life, too, but I felt like they could have put up a little bit more of a fight, you know what I mean? I will mention, however, that there were a few very clever tactics used by some of the characters, so at least, it helps to balance out the dumb decision-making a little bit. So Lesson of the Evil is a deliciously entertaining and exciting film. I love this movie, and I think it's one of Miike's best of the last decade. Now, the availability of Lesson of the Evil is that it is available on Region 2 DVD with subtitles. I think it's the UK release. Alright, our next film here is another Miike film that I got to see in the cinema in Japan. And this is called Shield of Straw. We're in 2013 now, and this is a thriller. After a young girl is murdered, the grandfather publicly issues a $10 million bounty on the head of the prime suspect, an already convicted rapist-murderer played by Tatsuya Fujiwara. An idealistic cop, played by Takao Osawa, is assigned to protect and transport the suspect, despite the repeated assassination attempts by citizens, criminals, and even police officers. So can our protagonist hold his moral ground and continue to protect this scumbag amidst the seemingly endless barrage of attacks? So this film is pretty absorbing, I thought, and pushes the protagonist's ideals to the limit, especially considering how Fujiwara's character is obviously a homicidal maniac whose protection endangers the lives of both police officers and citizens. So, as the body count of innocent deaths continues to rise, it becomes more and more difficult to justify this man's protection. Is it really worth protecting this slimeball in order to preserve the ideals of due process? You know what I mean? That's the question of the film. There are a few good action moments to enjoy, but the tension is expressed more so in the threat than the actual violence itself. Shield of Straw moves very briskly for a film of over 2 full hours in length, and is rather fun to watch, I think. There really is a threat around every corner, and a constant aura of danger that hangs over the characters. My favorite sequence is perhaps the one near the beginning involving a nitroglycerin truck. I like that one. Another thing I would like to point out is with regard to the performances by both lead actors, which is very good. I was a little bit surprised at this when I had first seen this back in 2013. Now, I would not classify Tatsuya Fujiwara as an elite actor, but he does not belong in the same ranks as elite Japanese stars like Hiroshi Abe and Koji Yakusho, you know what I mean? But with that said, he has definitely grown on me over the years, and I see him building a respectable career when all is said and done. I liked him in the live-action Death Note films and a few other flicks I've seen him in. Then there's Takao Osawa, a man who has had his fair share of cartoonish and or stiff performances previously, but here he turns in the best performance of his career and actually carries the film on his shoulders from start to finish. Ironically, I also saw him give a good performance in Strawberry Night from 2012, right around the same time I saw Shield of Straw, so he has grown on me also over time. Now, in terms of flaws, Shield of Straw does develop its themes rather bluntly. For example, there's some verbal exposition that could have been replaced more naturally by character action alone. There's also a sense of repetition and simplicity due to the lack of complexity and nuance for both the characters and the story. And there are a few boneheaded moves made by the cops here and there. But again, there is some well-written dialogue, and the film certainly never loses focus over its main theme. It doesn't go on a bunch of different tangents and get confusing or anything. it's pretty focused, and I appreciated that. And like I said earlier, Shield of Straw really pushes the morality of our protagonist to its limit. And that's what this film really does well. It tries to do it, and it does it well. I've never seen a protagonist in a film go this far to protect a worthless human being. So, all for the ideals of law and order. So I give the film credit. It is memorable in certain aspects. This could have been a completely forgettable thriller. I don't think it is. I think it has its memorable moments. So I do recommend Shield of Straw. And it is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, our next film tonight, not as good as the first few we covered. Not as good, but is it watchable? Let's see. So it is The Mole Song, Undercover Agent Reiji. 2013, this is a crime, comedy, drama, action hybrid. A not-so-smart cop is sent undercover to take down a Yakuza drug operation. Reiji, who has a strong sense of justice, graduated from the police academy with the lowest score ever. He becomes a police constable, but is suddenly fired by a police chief due to disciplinary issues. But in actuality, the firing is part of a carefully orchestrated plan. You see, Reiji is ordered to become a mole, or an undercover cop. His target is the boss of a powerful Yakuza syndicate that is the largest crime group in the Kanto area. So one thing you'll notice is that this is a nicely shot and colorful film, with some impressive interior set designs and lighting. Early on, there's a fairly lengthy scene inside of a club, which has a strong pink color scheme to it. Not a color scheme you see that often in films, and I did enjoy it. I liked the visuals in this. There's also some deep reds that are used later on. So let's rattle off a few more positives here. It's definitely a wackier film overall, but it's also tempered and serious at times, and I like that mix of tones here. Endearing performances by both lead actors, Toma Ikuta and Shinichi Tsutsumi, really help to anchor things, and Tsutsumi is good in almost everything I've seen him in. But Ikuta was handed a difficult task here because his character is so over the top. The fact that he did not grate on my nerves is a pretty big accomplishment, so I think he did a good job here. The entire film revolves around the interaction and relationship between these two characters, and it works. Some charming interaction there at times. There are also a few clever moments, too, like the police training test that kind of caught me by surprise. The protagonist's haircuts are also quite epic. Now, in terms of flaws, the story and the characters themselves are a bit too simplistic to carry a 130-minute runtime. No one really has an arc in this film, so to speak, or any kind of significant development. You do get a feel, though, for the personalities of the characters for sure, but there's not much depth here. Consequently, it does get a little bit monotonous to watch at times, but, it also seems a little bit too easy in how our protagonist quickly earns the trust of the Yakuza bosses to get in undercover, you know what I mean? I think it should have been a little bit more difficult for him to earn their trust. But, if you're in the mood for a wacky gangster comedy, you could do much worse than Mole Song, which also had a sequel released recently, which I mentioned earlier, that was directed by Miike, that I have not yet seen. Do not get the titles mixed up. The first film is called Mole Song Undercover Agent Reiji, while the sequel is called Mole Song Hong Kong Capriccio. So, what's the availability of this decent flick? Region 2 DVD without subtitles. Very hard to find it with subs. Keep checking YouTube, man. I'm telling you, sometimes these movies pop up. Alright, our next one here is another film for Miike that I think is underrated and underappreciated. And that is Over Your Dead Body, 2014 horror film. So while rehearsing a stage play based on the story Yotsuya Kaiden, a couple's romantic obsessions create a blurred line between reality and fantasy. A beautiful actress plays the protagonist in a new play based on the legendary ghost story. She pulls some strings to get her lover cast in the play, although he's a relatively unknown actor. With the cast in place, rehearsals for the play about the abusive relationship and a grudge begin. But offstage, some begin to develop their own obsessions. Trapped between play and reality, They are horrified to find out that a real grudge can cross that blurred line between reality and fantasy. Will love flourish, or has it already turned hideously dark? So first of all, this film looks gorgeous, with some excellent set designs to gawk at. I think my favorite set involves the black stage with glowing lanterns, which is featured multiple times, I believe. It looks fantastic. And there's a very interesting use of visuals in this film because it shifts between period sets that are used for the stage play and modern environments. So there will be times where you see the stage play occurring, the rehearsals, and then the camera will pan over and you'll see the crew in the modern stage environment. And I found that juxtaposition to be fascinating on a visual level, and it supports the themes and the structure of the film overall, because there are parallels between Yotsuya Kaiden and the characters' relationships. So it all works very nicely together. Those parallels, too, are not spelled out for the viewer through dialogue or monologue, so you do have to pay a little bit of attention here, because much of the content is communicated in subtle visual ways. There's definitely some ambiguity, too, down the stretch during the final third, that is subject to some interpretation from the viewer, which I liked. It makes you think a little bit. If you're unfamiliar with the story of Yotsuya Kaiden, this movie gives you a fairly comprehensive reenactment of that story, which is nice. It's very well acted by Ko Shibazaki and Ebizo Ichikawa. You will notice Shibazaki from Battle Royale. She was the crazy chick in that movie. And she also played the lead protagonist in One Missed Call, which was Miike's horror film back in 2003. Ichikawa was the lead character in Miike's remake of Harakiri, and has shown himself to be a pretty proficient actor. I always like it when he shows up in films. So the performances are solid in this movie. Over Your Dead Body is deliberately paced, which creates kind of a hypnotic, surreal tone and helps to create some creepy moments. There are also a few bloody, macabre images as well. The scare tactics are well executed and quietly intense, with virtually no cheap jump scares. I definitely approve of the horror content here, and there is some stuff that's a little disturbing and bloody too, so there's a nice mix. Now, I've seen this movie 3 times, and I think it's a strong outing for Miike after my third viewing. In fact, I thought that after my first and second viewings, but this just continues to hold up. This is a far more interesting film than something like Gozu, which tried to be psychological but was too uneventful and obnoxious for its own good. If I had to choose between rewatching Gozu or Over Your Dead Body, I would choose Over Your Dead Body every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I think this is a good flick for sure. Now, availability, it is widely available on DVD. Our next one here is another Miike film that I think is underrated. Horrendously underrated. And that is As the Gods Will, 2014, a horror comedy. So high school student Shun Takahata spends much of his time playing violent video games. One morning at school, he whines that his life is completely boring, but then he suddenly finds himself forced to participate in a game of Daruma-san ga Koronda, with death as the penalty for losing. But that's not all, because the other students in the school are also participating in other deadly games that point to a malicious supernatural force behind the events. As the players continue to be murdered and whittled down, they work their way towards a final deadly test. So right from the opening scene, you're going to realize that this is something very different. This has to be one of the most creative and entertaining opening sequences in recent memory, and those positive qualities continue throughout the remaining runtime. This is an extremely demented and nutty film with a wide variety of supernatural death games that utilize culturally specific Japanese objects as the physical bodies of gods. I don't think I've ever seen this in a movie before. Some of the death games are solved in clever ways, too. I mean, you can tell that there was some effort put into the script writing that surrounds these games. They are all dissimilar from one another, so they're completely different. They demand a blend of intelligence and athleticism on the part of the competitors, and the solutions that are discovered by the characters are pretty interesting. Now, this is especially true for those who are unfamiliar with the related manga. I have not read the manga, so everything in this movie was utterly fascinating to me, like just totally new. I have read a few reviews from people who have read the manga, and they said that the film was more predictable for them because it's heavily influenced by its source material. So it's just something to keep in mind. Another thing that really helps this film is the change in locations, because the premise here has a supernatural foundation. The characters are occasionally transported to strange settings that would never be in a normal school, and that helps to mix things up and prevent the film from becoming monotonous or overly familiar. In terms of special effects, lots of CGI is used in this, but it actually works for two main reasons. First, the fantastical nature of the story allows for it. Most of the CGI is for the outlandish godlike beings or the bizarre settings. And second, there is a significant amount of black humor that is present. This is not a scary film, nor does it ever really try to scare you, but it's certainly an amusing film, and the CGI assists that tone. But with that said, I still classify this as a horror comedy, despite its lighter tone, because there are plenty of thematic horror content in this. For example, the premise itself, as well as plenty of death scenes that would be very much at home in like a bizarre supernatural slasher, which is essentially what As the God's Will is. The finale is hilarious. It's exactly the kind of ending that I expect from a director who has a history of capping his films with unpredictable, playful, tongue-in-cheek endings. I love the ending to this. You do get a bit of character development here and there, but don't go into this expecting a dramatic story or social commentary. This is a very fast-paced thrill ride that's off the charts in terms of creativity and pure entertainment value. I mean, think about it. The premise of a bunch of high school kids being trapped in a building and forced to survive deadly events has been done plenty of times before in Japanese cinema. But Miike somehow created a film that has no direct Japanese comparison and is, in fact, completely memorable and different from every Japanese horror film that came before it, despite a similar overall premise. So he really came with the entertainment goods here. If you watch this film and are not entertained, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know what to tell you. This is going to be one of those titles that I rewatch over and over again. When I think of a Miike film that's just entertaining and fun, this is one of the first ones that comes to mind. I've already watched it 4 times, and it gets better every time I watch it. This film's just amazing. In terms of pure entertainment value, it just doesn't get a whole lot better, man. As the God's Will is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, our next one here is a bit of a step down, I think. So this one is a biopic. It's called The Lion Standing in the Wind. This is a 2015 Japanese drama. This is based on a real story and chronicles the life of Dr. Koichiro Shimada, who sets off to Kenya to serve as a medical doctor. Now, in a turn of events, he finds himself stationed in a hospital in the heart of the Kenyan conflict. Witnessing death and the grim reality of child soldiers rocks him to the core and propels him on a path that he did not expect. He abandons his life in Japan and devotes himself to saving lives in Kenya. Now, Miike shot a good portion of this film on location in Kenya, which gives it some authenticity. We get to see some of the cultural aspects over there, which is a good thing. Performances and direction are pretty good. Unfortunately, this film is just not very interesting. I mean, I mentioned that it was based on a true story, but it's presented in such a bland way that it fails to hold the viewer's interest. The characters in this are portrayed in a fairly one-dimensional manner. Our protagonist is a compassionate guy with little complexity. He befriends this one Kenyan kid who is also completely one-note. This is a very simplistic flick, with no nuanced or interesting interaction to really bring it to life, you know what I mean? It fails to compensate for this with any crowd-pleasing entertainment value as well. Dialogue, generally ineffective and obvious. A few scenes are actually rather cliched and feel fake, which is a disadvantage when making a biopic. Runtime of 138 minutes also does not help matters, making this a fairly difficult sit. But with that said, I do seem to be in the minority a little bit for disliking this one, because it does receive fairly good reviews online, generally positive reviews from those who have seen it. If the premise sounds interesting to you, give it a shot, but I just cannot recommend it because I just didn't think it was all that interesting or good. If you're in the mood for a drama, there are a number of other Miike films to watch before this. Harakiri, Death of a Samurai, Blues Harp, The Bird People in China. 3 examples right there for you. But, the availability of The Lion Standing in Wind might deter you from watching it anyways. It's available on Region 2, but without subtitles. Alright, our next film tonight gets very mixed reviews and quite a bit of hate from certain circles. I can kind of understand. And that is Yakuza Apocalypse 2015, a crime action comedy horror hybrid. In the ruthless underground world of the Yakuza, no one is more legendary than Boss Kamiura. Rumored to be invincible, the truth is that he is a blood-sucking Yakuza vampire boss. Among Kamiura's gang is Kageyama, his most loyal underling. However, the others in the gang view Kageyama with disdain and ridicule him for his inability to get tattooed due to his sensitive skin. One day, a group of assassins, who are aware of Boss Kamiura's secret, arrive from abroad and deliver him an ultimatum: return to the international syndicate he left years ago or die. He refuses and, during a fierce battle with anime otaku martial arts expert Kaioken, is torn limb from limb, and with his dying breath he bites Kageyama, passing on his vampire powers to the unsuspecting Yakuza. Now, as he begins to awaken from his newfound abilities, Kageyama's desire to avenge the murder of his boss sets him on a course for a violent confrontation with the foreign syndicate's mysterious and seemingly unstoppable leader. So a lot of people out there have serious problems with this film, and like I said, I can understand why. This is one of Miike's weirder films from recent years. It's not one of his best by any means, but I think it's watchable and does contribute a number of memorable laugh-out-loud moments. There's a cool decapitation scene rather early on. There's a Kappa monster gangster that shows up at one point, as well as a funny moment involving dynamite. And most of these scenes have a certain charm because they come from out of nowhere but are nonchalantly introduced as if they were normal events. It's all in the way Miike executes them, This moves fairly slowly during the opening half, which does create some pacing problems, I think. But the insanity ramps up later on, and there's plenty of Yakuza shenanigans to enjoy. Action in this, it's a mixed bag. A mixed bag, with some pretty good fights peppered throughout. The fights are kind of scrappy and lack complex choreography, which does make sense when one considers the characters. However, one of the final throwdowns is a big disappointment, because Yayan Ruyan, who played Mad Dog from the Raid films, has a supporting role in this movie, but is denied a great fight scene. That's just unacceptable. The reason you cast this guy is to have him fight proficiently in a great, memorable scene. Heck, he should have had Yayan choreograph some of the fights. You know what I mean? Because that's what he does for Gareth Evans on the Raid films. So I don't think his talents were tapped enough here. I mean, sure, he has a few decent skirmishes here and there, but his big fight with the protagonist consists of a frustratingly repetitive and comical series of just punches to each other's faces. Just like, punch him in the face, he punches him in the face. He punches him in the face, he gets punched in the face. Like, 50 times. It was like, you can obviously tell it was meant for comedic effect, but I think they should have, it was kind of a missed opportunity. If that fight was more creative and satisfying, it would have given this film a more satisfying conclusion and raised it up a notch in terms of pure entertainment value. I will say that Yayan's clothing is actually hilarious. He looks like he just finished a chess club match at a local high school. Definitely an amusing character design, especially when considering the actor that's playing that. Story and script are also fairly weak in this, but I do find Yakuza Apocalypse to be a watchable, loony fluff piece. This is one that, if somebody threw it on, I wouldn't mind watching it again at some point in the future. I don't think it's as bad as some people think, let's put it that way. Alright, DVD availability. Yakuza Apocalypse is widely available, yes. Not a high priority, though. I gotta emphasize that. Now, our next film tonight gets really bad reviews, and it's totally understandable. It's so bad that it makes Yakuza Apocalypse look like 13 Assassins in terms of quality and entertainment value. And I am talking, of course, about the notorious Terra Formars, 2016, a sci-fi action horror crapfest. So in the 21st century, overpopulation on Earth has become such a problem that scientists begin preparing for the colonization of Mars. Their first steps in the terraforming of Mars involve seeding the planet with moss in order to absorb the sunlight and create a hospitable atmosphere, as well as increase the surface temperature. They also introduce cockroaches in order to spread the moss. 500 years later, in the year 2599, a manned mission is sent to the Red Planet to clear out the cockroach colony in preparation for the human colonization of Mars. What they find is a mass population of mutated cockroaches that have unnatural predatory skills. Fortunately for them, the humans can inject themselves with a stupid serum that gives them insect-based superpowers. The problems with this film appear almost immediately. We're on Mars within the first 10 minutes. I usually appreciate it when a film just cuts the fat and gets right to business, but it did not feel like they set things up properly in this. It feels very rushed. The same is true for character deaths. I like how some of the leads bite the dust early on, but the attacks are too short-lived to be exciting or memorable. Heck, some of the characters even die off-screen, which is completely unacceptable. So yeah, Terra Formars gets off to a bad start, but it gets much worse as it progresses. Now, I've mentioned time and time again that I am not a stickler for special effects. You know, I can watch films with low-grade special effects as well as anyone. Remember, Clash of the Titans from 1981 is one of my favorite fantasy films of all time, and the special effects in that do not hold up quite that well. Some of the effects in Terra Formars are atrocious. They are atrocious. The odd thing, though, is that the CGI effects for the roach monsters are actually pretty good, as is the design of those monsters. The problem is the physical effects of the humans, which are pathetic. And I'm talking the physical effects, the makeup. Now, I'm unfamiliar with the anime or manga or whatever it's based on, but the mutant human character designs are incomprehensibly stupid. The makeup and costumes in this film are so god-awful and lame, it's almost unbelievable. It's not even cheesy stupid. It's just stupid. I mean, at one point, a dude's face turns into an insect flamethrower, and his cheeks wobble as he's flaming. He's like, and the flames are flying. It's like the dumbest, completely unwatchable garbage I've seen in the last decade. It's awful. It's still kind of hard to pinpoint why the physical effects pissed me off as much as they did. I think it's because, you know, the cockroach dudes actually looked kind of intimidating, but the humans beat them with some of the most idiotic power-ups and character designs I've ever seen. It just seems like a cheap cop-out that's used as an excuse to put no effort into constructing action or horror scenes, you know what I mean? Using these, you know, supremely proficient, murderous cockroach dudes. I mean, yeah, there is a lot of action in this movie, but the fights are lame, repetitive, cartoonish, and lacking in intensity. Not one legitimately suspenseful or cool moment in this entire film. I'm not even joking. Terra Formars is an abject failure of an action movie. Now, character development is almost non-existent, but when it does pop up its head, it's incompetently communicated. It's terrible. It's almost impossible to care about anything that happens in this movie. Script writing is completely worthless and uninteresting. The actors still try to act cool the whole time, which only adds to the lameness. There are plenty of films that involve protagonists who play it straight when confronted with absurd events, and are able to make it work. I mean, heck, Yakuza Apocalypse works way better than Terra Formars in that regard. You know, when a dude in a frog costume walks into a bar and beats the crap out of a bunch of surly Yakuza henchmen, that's legitimately funny. It's legitimately funny. Laugh out loud funny. because the frog-costumed villain is so stupid-looking, he sets up the joke almost immediately. You know what I mean? The cockroach monsters, like I said, look like an actual threat. Like, if one of these things was on my front lawn, and I saw him kill somebody using one of his, methods, I'd be peeing my pants. Like, I'm done for. You know what I mean? So the fact that they're beaten by dumb power-ups in badly constructed action sequences does nothing but diffuse a potentially interesting movie. You know what I mean? A real shame, too, when one considers the absolutely loaded cast. This is one of the most star-studded Japanese films of the last 20 years. I'm not even going to list all the actors' names because it would take too long. I mean, too bad it turned out to be a worthless cesspool of sewage. This is just straight-up dumpster juice. It's dumpster juice, people. Terra Formars. Yeah, I don't recommend it. It's available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles if you want to torture yourself, but I don't recommend this at all. Alright, finally, we're on our last one here. It's a good one. A nice rebound. And that is Blade of the Immortal. This is an action film from 2017. Now, I already reviewed this film separately on my channel, but I'll briefly summarize my thoughts here as well for your convenience. Blade of the Immortal takes place in Japan during the mid-Tokugawa shogunate period and follows the deeds of Manji, a skilled samurai who has a decisive advantage. No conventional wound can kill him. In the past, his actions of vengeance for the death of a family member led to the deaths of 100 other samurai. Near death himself, he then becomes immortal at the hands of an 800-year-old nun. Decades later, he befriends a young girl who desperately wants to avenge the death of her parents, who were slayed by a master swordsman who is attempting to take over all of the other dojos. So can Manji fight through the villain's clan of assassins and secure justice for their deplorable actions? So I'll start by saying this. The opening 10 minutes of this movie are legitimately outstanding. It's a fantastic sequence. It sets everything up quite nicely. It also establishes a darker tone than you might expect, especially if you've seen the trailers. Now, Blade of the Immortal is an action film first and foremost, so it really needs to succeed on that front in order to work overall. And most fortunately, I think that it's a very effective action extravaganza. There are a few huge battles here and there, but also a lot of one-on-one duels or scuffles with a small handful of characters that are peppered throughout. This film keeps moving, and there always seems to be a fight around every corner. Consequently, the 140-minute runtime actually flies by much faster than you may think. In terms of action choreography, this is more of a traditional swordplay style you would have seen in films from like the 1970s, which does increase the risk of things getting a bit monotonous. And there are a few patches that do feel a little bit repetitive. Nevertheless, this does compensate by introducing different weapons and character abilities that helps to mix things up. Look out for Erika Toda and her 3-section staff, which are some of my favorite moments in the film. In terms of camera work, there's a mix of wide shots and close-up shots. Now, I typically prefer wide camera angles for my action scenes, and Miike thankfully used enough of them and spaced out the editing enough so that the viewer could easily comprehend and understand what was happening during the fights. So overall, I think it's successful. Obviously, I would have preferred maybe a few more wider shots, but it's still good, quite good. I did rewatch this movie for a second time just recently with subtitles. I do think that the character interaction improved slightly because of that, because the first time I saw it, it was without subtitles. It is a rather simplistic conflict, and the storyline tosses in a few wafer-thin side characters, but I did enjoy the chemistry between our protagonist and the young girl. They have some good interaction. That's the most important relationship of the film, and I think it works. Cinematography and environments are very nice here. Again, a lot of Miike's recent films are very nicely shot. Overall, Blade of the Immortal is a legitimately fun samurai-era action flick that I recommend. And it is on Amazon Instant Streaming currently, and I'm sure it'll probably get a DVD or Blu-ray release in the near future, I would assume. Alright. So what are the higher priority items that we covered tonight? I would say that Lesson of the Evil, Over Your Dead Body, and As the Gods Will are the must-sees, with Blade of the Immortal and Shield of Straw being two of the better titles that lie immediately below those. Now, before we finish things up tonight, I wanted to talk briefly about another complaint that I hear about Miike's recent films. Apparently, people have a problem with the source of his scripts nowadays. So let's take a quick look at the films from the last decade. We're going through Miike's films from 2008 through 2017. Of the 20 films released during that period, one was based on a video game, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. One was a biopic, The Lion Standing in the Wind. One was based on a popular Japanese legend, Over Your Dead Body. Two were remakes, Harakiri Death of a Samurai and 13 Assassins. Two were based on novels, God's Puzzle and Lesson of the Evil. Two were based on anime, Yatterman and Ninja Kids. Three were original scripts, Shield of Straw, Yakuza Apocalypse, and Zebraman 2. The first Zebraman film actually inspired the manga series of the same name, which was kind of interesting when I read that. So that leaves 12. Well, actually, that is 12 of his last 20 films were created from those various sources. So what do you think his other 8 films were based off of? Manga, of course, okay? And people seem to have a problem with this. Now, apparently, Miike has made too many films that are based on manga. So let's take a look at the 8 films that are based on manga. Crow Zero 2. I like that one quite a bit. For Love's Sake. Pretty flimsy flick. Take it or leave it. Watchable. The Mole Song, Undercover Agent Reiji. Pretty good. As the Gods Will. I love that movie. Terra Formars. Atrocious garbage. Blade of the Immortal. Legitimately enjoyable. And then there was The Mole Song, Hong Kong Capriccio, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, both of which I have not yet seen. So we do get a decent variety in terms of premise for Miike's recent manga adaptations from the last decade, with a few gangster flicks, a romance musical, a supernatural slasher comedy, a sci-fi action flick, and a samurai-era action flick. But this is a criticism of Miike that I can definitely understand. I hope that I've made the argument through this playlist that most of the criticisms that you typically hear hurled at Miike are rather unconvincing and or factually incorrect. But after reviewing this list of Miike's recent manga adaptations, I am seeing a few problems with this. Now, most of these films are pretty over the top and are also lacking in strong traditional character development for the leads, with a few exceptions. Now, I personally would like to see this director pepper in some additional films that are more grounded in reality and have more traditionally effective dramatic elements to them. Maybe add in more stuff like Lesson of the Evil, Over Your Dead Body, and Harakiri Death of a Samurai. More stuff like that and less of the manga adaptations in the future. I think that would be one, I guess you could say, shift in Miike's portfolio that I would enjoy and I think would improve things a little bit. He is directing a murder mystery film set to be released in 2018 called The Place's Witch, which is based on a novel and looks like it could be pretty interesting. So that's a step in the right direction. But I can understand some people that are getting frustrated with Miike adapting a manga, you know what I mean? Because most of them, like I said, have those particular qualities. Some of them, like As the Gods Will, I freaking love. But I can see, I would like to see him do some more of those dramas or more grounded stuff. All right, before I leave you tonight, let's quickly summarize a few things that we've learned while going through Miike's filmography. Hopefully we learned a lot, but here are a few things I want to emphasize. First of all, this man made a large number of films. The advertised claim that he's made 100 movies, however, seems to be partially inflated and somewhat inaccurate. I think he's made less than that. Probably in the low 90s, I would guess. Check out my introduction video on this playlist for more information on that and how I'm quantifying that. And what titles I'm excluding when coming up with, that type of number. Also, the oft-repeated criticism that he's made too many films seems convincing on its surface, but weakens considerably once we actually attempt to carve up his more active years, the more active years in his filmography, into a more reasonable production schedule. In addition, Miike's productivity in recent years has made this criticism outdated by more than a decade. So check out part 5 of this playlist for some discussion on those points. I talk about that for like 15 minutes. So, it was a pretty interesting, I guess you could say, what would you call it? Presentation for you. So we've also learned that Miike could be the most versatile director in the history of cinema. That's really not much of an overstatement because the sheer variety of films within his filmography is mind-blowing. And with regard to that observation, I do think that moviegoers with an eclectic taste in film are more likely to be bigger fans of this director. I really think that's the case. If you only like certain kinds of films, your appreciation for his, wide-ranging filmography may be somewhat limited. We've learned that One Missed Call was not Miike's first mainstream film. He made films like Andromeda in 1998 and White Collar Worker Kentaro in 1999. That claim is objectively false. Please stop using it. We've learned that the rather odd assertion that Miike limited himself to passion projects during his prime years and has regressed nowadays to making films that he does not care about is an argument that holds no weight, really, when you look at his history. That's because Miike has always been a director for hire, even right from the start. Now, I covered this a little bit in part 5 of this playlist. He has actually mentioned this topic in interviews when he said things like, quote, "I don't choose the projects. I think the projects choose me," unquote. I also found an interview he had with Midnight Eye, the website. Now listen to this quote, okay? Quote, "So my attitude is that I don't refuse any offers, but I really consider the way to do it very carefully. I think there are 2 types of directors. One is the type that is very careful of himself and chooses the subjects that fit him and that he really wants to do, and he does them carefully. The other type does one thing after another and is not afraid of changing himself. He changes naturally while making these films one after another. I am the second type, but for me, working so much is not intentional. I worked very hard as an assistant director, so that became my routine," unquote. Well, that interview must have been conducted fairly recently, right? Now that he's a sellout. I mean, maybe during the press junket for Terra Formars he said this, right? No, that was actually published back in 2001. So he's always been a director for hire and has never been picky about choosing films to direct. So I don't understand where that argument ever came from. All right, so yeah, that's a nice little brief rundown for you. So that does it, really, for my Takashi Miike filmography review. Of course, I will add more reviews to this playlist as I see his newer stuff. I hope that I've been able to at least provide enough information on each film to help you prioritize which titles to seek out first. I may eventually post a best and worst of Takashi Miike video at some point in the future, but I want to avoid that right now because that would just give people an excuse to skip this filmography project that took me all year to put together. So I would say that my favorite Miike films are fairly obvious if you actually watch the videos in this playlist. So for now, I'm going to kind of force people to watch the playlist to get those recs. With regard to future filmography projects, I will be discussing that topic in my channel update video later this month, but what I can say now is that I plan on implementing a more abbreviated format for any filmography reviews that I do in the future. So if I choose a director or an actor to focus on, it'll be more like a best and worst video that focuses on the standout titles. So, it'll be a little bit more abbreviated and, more to the point. Because sometimes covering every single film in a filmography of a director is just, there's a lot of disadvantages to that for many directors out there, which I'll go over in my channel updates. So more on that later. And as always, I will see you next time.